Well, I can hold it up for you. That's not a problem. I don't want to put anybody off viewing though, thinking I'm pushing my book, because we have a bigger message to say, don't we, really, about this lifestyle. But well, it is important. It's important to me, and it's my outlet. But I'll explain that during our conversation. So thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that. And famous, well, my former students, that I said, possibly infamous, or as they always call me, I'm a legend, or as we will joke and say, a leg end. But it's whatever wording we want to put on that. But thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. It's in a strange way, because I have been a while on the athletic scene. When I go places, I get recognised, and I think that the name Smart is quite stands out as well. It's distinctive. And when you're cycling in triathlons, you have this speed suit which has your name across your backside. So I have Smart right across the back, which there's, as you know, there's a smart ass. So you could almost say that I'm so full of, possibly I'm so full of myself. But I I think sometimes we need to be a little bit, especially if we're proud of what we've got to say and proud of our message. So for your viewers and listeners, I have been a carnivore now. While I've been telling this story over the last few months, I was saying 7 years. It's actually 8 years when I do the maths, and I should have done the maths a little bit better, because I am a recently retired mathematics teacher. So possibly I could be excused on the maths because I have retired. But so 8 years, and 2 years prior to that was keto. One regret I have is that I didn't keep a journal. So if anybody's starting on this route, please keep a journal for yourself. It's really quite good to look back. And also you can reflect, just whether it's your personal notes or how you're feeling that day, or anything from a little bit of cramping or something. And then you can look back and say, oh, I recall that. And perhaps it was after I'd eaten this particular food, or I'd done this particular bit of training, or just something you have no idea. But for me, my journal would have been a beautiful story about my journey. And that's where it derives from, is the word. And George has heard this story a few times, but I came into the carnivore way of living as a fuel source for my athletic way of living. So, as being an athlete, I wanted to fuel my endurance running further. Recently, and thanks to George, I've been introduced to some beautiful people in the carnivore world, and they've often recovered from really serious illnesses. I wasn't aware of this. As strange as it may sound, I came in just from a choice to see if I can experiment to fuel for endurance athletic events. Now, of course, on this journey over these 8 years, I have had incredible side effects. I don't even want to say side effects, but positive side effects. Whereas my hair has started to get darker, my skin has got better conditions. My levels of with the ketones, as we know, but my thought is beautiful. It's just there. It feels I'm on fire all the time. I wake up feeling full of energy. I go to bed feeling full of energy. I've just come back now from a really hard workout in the gym. Jumped into the shower, and I'm ready to go again, because the recovery is so good. And that's what I noticed. So back to where I started in this keto journey was, it was probably quite early on, wanting to try to run. I was an overweight middle-aged man in his 40s, who telling my children that, oh, that weight around me, that's what happens when you get to this age. And then my daughter joking and says, oh, it's a spare tire, Dad, around your waist. And I'm saying, no, this is what muscular men are like. I like to think of myself more of a rugby player size, but really it was just overweight. And George has seen some of these before pictures, and I can share those with you. And I was very heavy. So when I started to try to run, it wasn't easy. And then I learned that there was a couch to 5K app that you could slowly get on board. And as I started to feel a bit better, I started to get a little bit quicker, but I was enjoying that. Now, when some of my colleagues who are also in the running world said about doing marathons, I said, there's no chance, because you guys take energy gels every 20 minutes. You have them all around your belt, these high carbohydrate energy gels. and they have real GI problems, real digestive problems, rushing to the toilets all the time. And that set me off on this idea of thinking, how can I fuel this way of eating? Sorry, guys, I'm wittering. Can I carry on with my story? Is it okay, or does that? Okay, so I wanted to know how I could fuel this way of eating. There must be a way. None of our ancestors used to take high fructose syrup energy gels every 20 minutes, and they used to run animals to exhaustion. And man can outrun, or humankind can outrun animals, and that's how we hunted. And if we wouldn't be around today if it wasn't for our ancestors doing that. So that got me thinking, why can't I do this? And all my research, and I love to read, I came across if I kept below 50 grams of carbohydrates, I could be in this ketogenic state, and that's maybe possibly where I'd fuel. So I set about going that way, and it's not easy initially to keep under 50 grams of carbs because you can soon go up to that. But I've discovered things like cauliflower rice and replacing a lot of my food sources with this. But then the problem was, what do you have for breakfast? What do you do for my lunch at school? Because it's a busy day and needed to fuel. And I'm thinking about, in the UK, we always go to the standard sandwich. And the filling inside this sandwich, and you fill yourself up and you feel a bit better for that. Maybe a packet of crisps, you'd call them chips. And yeah, and that's probably what you'd have for lunch. But this insulin was up and down, up and down. After a while, I realised, actually, I don't need for my lunch. It's the contents of my sandwiches are more important than the bread, and slowly started to realise the problems of wheat. And soon as I took wheat out of my diet, and I realised it was a filling agent in a lot of our food here in the UK, in the sausages, these beautiful, it was a filling agent. So I had to get rid of all that wheat out of all that food. Now, actually, if I'm doing that, I'm naturally digressing to drifting over to natural food rather than processed food. But I wasn't particularly aware of this. Then, after about 2 years and getting leaner and quicker and enjoying it more, I started to think, why don't I go full carnivore? Try it, just take the carbohydrates down to zero, because they were naturally dropping. Why I started this conversation saying about I'd like to have kept a journal, because I'm not too sure of the exact dates, but it was over this sort of approximately 18 months to 24 months that I slowly started to bring these carbohydrates down to zero. Along with that came the fasting, and I found it so much easier just not to have breakfast. And without breakfast, I had more energy, which was at the time counterintuitive. But we now know that breakfast can be possibly one of the worst meals of the day, especially with the high carbohydrate sugars that people tend to eat, thinking that will give them the energy. So became carnivore and never looked back. There's not one moment I've ever thought I've taken the wrong journey here. Now, when I've spoken to George, and thank you to George for introducing me to such a beautiful world of other carnivores, I did not know there were others doing what I was doing. As strange as it sounds, and enjoying social media and the internet, and I certainly never thought about going onto Facebook or into these groups and actually looking for other carnivore groups, which have made my journey a lot easier. It would have been incredible. But I traveled down this on my own, experimenting with the salt levels of sodium, the magnesium, realizing that sometimes I may not be getting the right omega in there, maybe bringing some fish into it, and just experimenting as I've gone. And one of these experiments was after about 2 years, and I decided, right, I have done a 24-hour fast, and it was a water fast at this point. And I got up, I woke up, and I live by the coast here, and it's quite hilly out here in the north of England. And I set off and I ran 28 miles. So a marathon is 26.2. Ran 28 on a hot day, came back, no water, and sat down and thought, yes, now that's not a bad experiment for myself. For 24 hours on a water fast and still ran a marathon. And it's under 4 hours, which is not a bad time for an ultra marathon of 28 miles. So this all became evidence for me, for my own evidence, basically, to support my own theory. And over the years, plenty of my athletic friends used to take me aside and say, you've got a problem here, because if you start eating, as they saw it, as saturated fats, then they would see the cholesterol, because it was so demonized. Thank you to Ansel Keys, if he's listening. But it was so badly demonized that we've all bought into that narrative. So they were concerned, especially my good friend. He was concerned that this was something I would not be able to go back again. Once I'd done that damage to my heart, then it would be irreversible. Whereas I was so convinced in my theory that I knew that I was taking the right route, and I've proven it, and I still feel good. So back to what I was just sort of touching on, saying that I was out there on my own, and this is why things like your channel here is so beautiful. What George is doing is to help people on this journey. And that's what I'm trying to do now with my social media, with thanks to George, with being invited onto podcasts and introducing me to others, and through my book. Because over the last 12 months, plenty of people have said, probably even longer than that, going back 24 months or so, because they've started to see my results in the athletic world. And they wanted to know what my secret was, what my super fuel was. And I pretty strongly believe some of them suspected that I may have been taking performance enhancing drugs. Whereas I don't even take a paracetamol. I haven't taken a painkiller for 8 years. I've had no need. So there's nothing on that way. And we do get drug tested at these events. So so I think I was what was I just saying? Oh yeah. And everything was pointing in the right direction with this way of eating, with the energy. And I feel as though I can come home. Well, I used to come home from school and feel a little tired. I don't have that tiredness now. I just seem to have energy, and it seems to be the same level of energy all day long. So I've got loads of stories and very interesting information about training camps in the south of France where we've got a carbohydrate load and for the GB team. But I had to lie and doing mountainous challenges and in schools about lying about the healthy food plate and the pyramid and telling the students that I eat a balanced diet, although they wanted to emulate the way I live. But now, that's what I was saying. Sorry guys, I was back to the book. So people have said to me, you should write a book, and everybody should really, but without keeping the journal, I didn't think that would really work that well. But as you guys do, I believe it so strongly, this way of living, and I want to share it with everybody, but nobody would believe me. Everybody would look at me as I was some sort of mythical creature. And not, when you've all experienced that, when they say, what do you live on? And you tell them, meat. And fatty meat, the fat is cut. And they start to think, well, why don't you have all these other problems? And you can go into explain it, but you can see almost a curtain goes up in front of their eyes. They do not want to see it. They don't want to believe that they may have been eating incorrectly for 40 to 50 years. So that's when this idea of this book came around, and I will hold it up now, which is Carnivore the Manual. But it's written around the narrative, telling through the eyes of a vampire. And that may be where a little bit people may think it's storytelling, it's fiction. Well, there are fictional areas in there, but it's more parable. So each chapter is a standalone chapter, and it's about the health and the medical and the science behind this way of eating. Then, after explaining the science, then I wrap it up in a little parable, a little bit of fiction, because sometimes, especially I found in education, that's a good way of delivering a message. And because people can relate to it a little bit. As the book evolves and we get towards the latter chapters, you realise that the vampire isn't a vampire, it's actually me. But they're more likely to believe it told through the eyes of a mythical creature, because they always thought I was mythical anyway. So well, I think I've told everything about the book there, and yes, No, and many people have asked me, and I've had some really beautiful positive feedback. In fact, every message has been positive, and people asking me to do an audio because they like my voice. I mean, I just think of myself as a Yorkshireman, and here in the UK, it's, as George will know, it's a very distinctive, it's a very different accent to George's, but we are just Englishmen that speak it as it is. So, yeah, maybe I should. Interesting, and it's something I've thought about an awful lot. And what I've actually, and it sounds as strange as it sounds, is I try to keep my protein below a certain amount. When I say try, I'm not religious about it, but round about the 120 to 130 grams of protein, because I believe that over a certain amount, your body could possibly to, treat it differently and turn it to a form of glycogen. So I'm trying to avoid that. And also, and again, it sounds very strange, but what I've noticed over these several years is I put muscle on very easy. So, and muscle is great for an athlete, but then also you don't want to be overly heavy. So I on some of the bike routes, I mean, it might be 100-mile bike race, and there's a lot of hills on that. If I'm carrying an extra 10 kilos or 20 kilos, it can make a lot of difference. But it's just getting the right balance. So when I say try, I'm not too regimented about it, but it's just something that's been at the back of my mind. So what I've actually found to answer the question is I need a higher ratio of fat. So I really do need the fat for the fuel. It was fine years ago when I possibly used the fat that I had stored, but my body fat now is pretty low. So things like lamb, I tend to find I have a beautiful race the next day if I fueled on lamb the night before, or duck, because it's a high quantity of fat on there, good fat. Pork's not bad, belly pork, but it's if you can tolerate pork. But what I tend to find with that, I'm actually really hungry the next day if I've had an evening meal of pork. It just do you? I mean, to answer that question, my previous partner, she trained for Ironman events, and she's done what with me 3 Ironman events. For anybody listening, there's a few miles of swimming, and you've got 112 miles on the bike, and then you run a marathon off the back of it. She pretty good athlete. When I met her, I just said to her that she should start eating this way of being a carnivore. So we did an experiment. She did a full Ironman on a 24-hour fast, and I gave her some emergency food, which was just some pork pieces, salted pork pieces wrapped and on a crossbar. She never needed one of those, although she did take slightly salty water with her. And the night before, to fuel that, we had a big mixture of meats. It was pork, ribs, and lamb chops, and some beef. I think it was short rib beef as well, to make sure that it was the right ratios. Now, she was a little bit concerned on the start line. She was looking at me. She's thinking, for a 12-hour or to 13-hour endurance race, non-stop, full speed, is she going to be able to last out on this? And I said, you've just got to trust me on this. Well, she's done every event since as a carnivore on a fasted state. because you felt so good. You don't stand at the start of the race without, you feel good, put it that way. When I was about 2 years in, before I came carnivore, I actually did another experiment. It was at Manchester Marathon, which is a pretty good marathon over here in the UK, second to London. And one of my friends said he would like me to do another experiment now and actually carbohydrate load before the marathon, which I was reluctant to do. But I said I'll do it because we have a theory that maybe carbohydrates is the rocket fuel. So I carbohydrate load as he did, and then take some energy gels with me. Well, it was a stupid experiment from my point of view because I had all sorts of issues. Yes, I came in at a really good time. I finished the marathon, but I felt as though I was shaking. My body didn't know what it was doing. I was really struggling, and cramping as well because my muscles really didn't absorb water because they weren't taking the carbohydrates. So they were all over the place, and I'll never do that experiment again. Sorry, that was a long question, a long answer to his